Hi there, it's DerpyMoose99. This is going to be episode 0 of the Purevanilla series. This is a basic interface tutorial, and this was at the request of DrizzW on Twitch. So Drizz, let me know if this is what you're looking for, or if there's something else I can provide. Well, the first thing you want to do when you start a map here, and I would recommend easy. Actually, let's just look at the map here. So in Purevanilla, I picked valleys, large. Climate is fair. You can go mild. Disasters off until you're familiar with the game. And starting conditions are on easy. Okay, so when the game starts, hit spacebar, which pauses the game. And your camera is your WASD, and Q and E will spin the view around. Alright, and mouse wheel will zoom in and out. Now if we go down here and look at the bar, there is a time control as a furthest left icon. So basically you can speed it up to speed 10. But in the beginning you're going to want to pause and set things up. The next icon over is tools and report icon. And there's some things that you're going to want up all the time. So the first one here is basically your, I call it your town stats basically. So this just shows you what season you're in, and there's spring, summer, autumn, and winter, early, late kind of thing. And this tells you how many people you have. So this is adults first, students second, and children last. This will tell you how many logs you have. This is stone and iron. You can mouse over these two. Firewood, etc. Right? So there's stuff up here that you want to watch pretty religiously. So you want to make sure you have stone and log for building, iron for tools and stuff, and the tools icon is pretty important. So firewood here and food here, and then you can look at the other ones here. The other indicators here, hearts is your health. So 5 hearts is maximum health, and there's things that affect health, but the largest thing that affects health is your diet. So there's 4 food groups in Banished. There's fruit, vegetable, grain, and protein. And if you have those, that's pretty much good for 4.5 hearts. And then there's something called a herbalist later that'll have a heart or whatever, right? So the next thing over here, stars, is happiness, and 5 stars is your maximum. So the things that affect happiness are generally having food and clothing. There's also churches and cemeteries and things like that that can improve happiness as well. Wells, for example, around houses will also improve happiness. But generally, if you take care of the basics, so you take care of your 4 food groups, clothing and tools and housing, and these things will pretty much take care of themselves. And the last one symbol over here is for temperature, and I believe this is currently, you can set for either Celsius or Fahrenheit depending on what you want. Alright, so the second thing you want up here is your event log, and you can just grab these and move them around. Okay, and this will just tell you events, and up here are some symbols. These are for the audible alarm, so you can turn some of these off if the audibles are driving you a bit crazy. The common one I turn off is this one that says resource notification. Looks like an empty cup here. I typically turn that one off, but up to you. Okay, this is the map, and on vanilla it's a pretty small map, but it'll give you an overview of the whole map. You can also mouse around as well too, WASD around. Some people pop that up in the corner. Okay, the next thing here, the 4th icon along, is called assign jobs, and this is your professions. So a lot of people keep this up too, and it's helpful for sure. And you notice there's laborers. The 2 main ones are laborers and builders at the beginning, and then as you build other structures, if you build farms, you'll need farmers. If you build a pasture, you'll need herdsmen. So you want to look at that. It's ideal too to never go completely to 0 on laborers, because if a worker dies, let's say one of these other professions, and there's a laborer available, the laborer will be promoted into that spot. So pretty useful to have laborers around anyways because they carry stuff, but also important to have them to backfill jobs. So sometimes you have to juggle it a bit in the beginning, but pretty good idea to keep at least a couple laborers in even early if you can. Okay, so that's the professions tab. You will run into things where if you build a building and there's a question mark above it, typically that'll mean that there's nobody assigned to work there. So you can either click on the building to do the assignment, or you can come into here and use the arrows to do the assignment. Alright, and this nice button here, this is the up arrow with the line across, this is your resource limits. This is basically so you can control production. So if you don't want the foresters to harvest any more logs, you just set this to the number you want. Now, it doesn't affect harvesting off the ground or cutting down trees manually. This affects the production of your various buildings and stuff like that. So a lot of these you don't actually want to control, but some of them you do. If, for example, tools are made from precious material like iron, and you don't have a lot of iron, and you want to use iron for other things, you set the tools to a reasonable limit, and your blacksmith will only make tools up until that limit and won't use up all your stock. So some people keep that one open. I don't really see a reason to keep it open, you know where it is. The next arrow over here is increase priority. Now if you're building something, you just grab this arrow and you highlight that building, and it'll tell the workers that's the first thing they want done. Now it's not a perfect tool, they don't immediately start building that, but it puts it to the top of their to-do list. The next tool over is a pathing tool here. Now this will show where people are working and where they're living. So if you click on a house, I can't do it here because there's no jobs assigned yet. But if you click on a house, it'll show you where they're working. And if you click on work, it'll show you where they're living. And that becomes important because travel time is a big deal in Banished. So the bigger your town gets, you want to make sure you're going to have houses near your place of work for productivity. But anyways, that's a pathing tool. The next thing over here is a camera icon. Now it's got 5 settings here. These are hotkeys for your town. So for example, and they're based on ZXCVB. So one of the first things I do on a new town is get a camera position over your town. And once you have a comfortable camera position, just hit the first camera icon here for Z. Now if you're off working on something, you can just hit Z and it'll take you back there. I don't know if you say Z or Z, but there you go. So that's your camera controls. Next one over here does nothing, and then there's a help topic there, the question mark. Alright, so that's the gear icon down here. The next tab over is your housing tab. So there's wooden houses, stone houses, and boarding houses. So wooden houses are the easiest to build with the least amount of material, but they use more firewood in the winter. So it's an idea that when you get enough resources and you're comfortable to build stone houses, you can also come into the wooden house here, and there's a little icon here, a little house icon up the top right, and that says stone house. So you can actually upgrade that down the road. Now what that'll do is temporarily deconstruct the house and then rebuild it, but not something to worry about in the beginning. And then a boarding house is a big house. Now this is for a lot of people to share a house. So typically you build these if you want to do, say, house upgrades so people have a place to live. Or there's something called nomads, people that'll show up down the road and they need temporary housing. But treat the boarding houses as temporary housing only and don't worry about them in the beginning. Okay, next icon over is roads and bridges. So there's 2 kinds of roads in vanilla. There's the dirt road and the stone road. So the dirt roads are basically resource free to build. Stone roads cost stone. Now stone's a pretty precious thing in the beginning. So You only build stone roads on major arteries when you have enough stone. And the significance of the stone road, other than they look cool, is people move faster on the stone road. So if you have a road, like I call it an arterial road, where there's a lot of traffic on that road, say between, two areas that you've got going, and you have the stone, like I say, consider an upgrade there to speed up travel time. Because again, in Banished, travel time is pretty important. Again, there's a wooden bridge here, which you can run across like a stream here, or over here. Okay, and take resources to build and stuff like that. Okay. Good idea. Not super early, but before too long you want to build bridges, because there's resources lying on the ground that you'll exhaust, and you'll want to get across the bodies of water to get the additional resources. And if you've run out of resources, you don't have any material to build a bridge, so fairly early on you want to build some bridges. Okay, and the last icon here is a tunnel icon. So that's used for going through mountains here. Very expensive when it comes to stone, and not something you want to do early, but certainly as you expand, you're going to want to make use of the tunnels. Alright, next icon along here is storage, markets, and trading. So there's two types of storage in the game. So as you can see here, let's zoom in on it. This is a barn. So a barn holds things like food, tools, clothing, stuff like that. The other thing to build here is a second icon over called a stockpile, which you can make like this. In a stockpile, that holds things like iron, logs, stone, firewood, and lumber. Now, that's actually in a mod, so don't worry about that. So the materials are in stockpiles, and food and tools and coats and stuff are in the barns. So pretty important to build those near the buildings that produce. So if you have let's say this a different way. If you have something that produces food, like a farm or a hunting cabin, you're going to want a barn nearby, so the workers have a close place to put the food when they harvest it. You don't want them walking a long way. And if you have a forester or a miner or something like that, you're going to want to stockpile close to the forester and miner so they can deposit their material. And then once stuff is in a barn or stockpile, it's available for other people to use. So people will go into a barn, get food, carry it back to their house, and you can see in the house here, there's an inventory section. This is empty because the game's not started yet. Okay? And if people need tools or clothing, they'll go to the barn and get that. And if you have something like, say, a woodcutter for firewood, and they'll come to a stockpile, get a log, take it back to their place of work, chop it into firewood, and then it'll be carried by a laborer back into the stockpile as firewood. Okay? So you're going to want a fair amount of storage around the map. Now keep in mind everything costs resources. And even stockpiles. You can build stockpiles where it's clear ground, basically for free, but if you build them over top of something, it'll be a different color here, and it'll say remove 0 of 6. That means a laborer has to come along and remove 6 items out of here before the stockpile will be built. Okay. More on that stuff later. So that was the storage, and the next thing was the marketplace. Now what a marketplace does is it collects everything up. So it collects food, tools, clothing, and it collects up, logs and stone and stuff like that. So typically what you do on a design basis is you build one of these in a central area, and then it's got a yellow circle. So any houses within that circle will go to the marketplace as their first choice to get anything they need. So not required in the beginning, but as you build larger towns, you're going to want different clusters of housing focused on a marketplace, but don't worry about it in the beginning. The other sort of mid to late game item is a trading post. Now this large river that runs through the map is called the trading river. So the trading post needs to be placed on the trading river, or any lake that's collected or connected directly to the trading river, do not place these trading posts on these small streams, okay, because the traders don't go in the small streams. So mid to late game, you'd build one of these on the side of the river here, and you'd fill it up with supplies, and you trade with the trading boats that come by. Okay, but not to worry about markets or trading ports early in the game. Okay, the next icon here is the judge's hammer here. This is town services. So the first thing is wells. And what wells do is, it's actually two things. There's a little bit of happiness for houses near a well, but also for later on when you have disasters turned on, wells are used for firefighting. So people will run to the well, get water, and put it on the building. So with disasters on especially, you're going to want a bunch of wells all around your map. Next item is the schoolhouse here. So before I talk about schools, I want to talk about the banished people. So without a school, people will age up until the age of 10, and then they will change from a child into a laborer or an adult. Now don't worry about the ages here, it's just a game, and the programmer did things to make it easy to program. If you put a school in when the child turns 10, instead of turning into a laborer, it will attend the school as a student. Now, the length of time the person is in the school will depend on how far away their house is from the school. So if the house is relatively close, the student will probably be 5 years in school. If it's far away, it could be as many as 10 or 11 years. While they're in school, they are not producing anything. In fact, they're eating food, and they're using up firewood and all that kind of stuff. So you have to decide when the right time to put a school in, because instead of having a valuable worker, you now have a student. And this is no comment on real life, by the way. Now, the benefit of actually having a school is when the student graduates, they're going to be vastly more productive than an uneducated laborer. So anything they do, they're going to do, I can't remember the exact number, it's 30% or something like that. But anything they're going to do, they're going to do a bit more of, right? So you do want to get education in your town fairly quickly, but maybe not the first thing you build, right? You want to make sure you get a stable supply of food and tools and firewood and stuff before you move into education, okay? But just understand that what the school does is it takes people out of circulation for 5 years or so, but it makes them much more efficient when they do graduate. Okay, next thing along here is a hospital. This is a cross symbol. Now there are plagues or illnesses in Banished, and if you get an outbreak, you'll need to have a hospital with a physician assigned, and the sick people will go to that hospital. Now, you don't really need to build it super early, and the other tip on the hospitals is don't build them right in town, because if there's sick people in the hospital and somebody walks by outside, there's a chance that they will get sick too, and the illness will spread. So think of something like a sick room in the woods kind of thing, where you build a hospital away from your town, away from high travel areas. Okay, next button along here is Town Hall. Now this is a super expensive building, but it will give you a lot of metrics, graphs, statistics, and stuff like that. So when you can afford to build it, it's quite worthwhile to build to give you the metrics and the stats, but not an early game building. Okay, next building is a chapel here. So this has a limit to the number of people it can service, but this will be a happiness addition for your people. And cemeteries as well. So if you build graveyards, when people lose loved ones, they'll be buried in the graveyard, and people can go visit in the cemetery, and it's a minor happiness bump up here. Okay, but don't worry about them right away. And I'll talk about priorities after I finish going through the interface here. The next button here is food production. So we have a crop field here. Okay. Typically you want something that's 120 squares, so that would be a 12 by 10, or an 11 by 11, so 121, that's close enough. Now, in this case, we're on easy start, so we have two random crops here. We have wheat and corn. Now, with a crop field, they have to plant in spring, and they harvest in autumn. So the game starts at early spring, so if you're going to plant crop fields, do it right away while you're paused, and pick a spot like I did here where it'll build without clearing, right? So I'll just do that again just to show you. So if I was going to build a crop field here, and I wanted to build it over here where these trees are, again it says remove 0 of 28 are removed. So somebody's going to have to remove 28 rocks and trees and stuff before that crop field can be built. And that won't happen in spring, right? So right at the start here, find a clear spot if you can, and build your 12 by 10 like that. Alright, and I'll talk a bit more. Actually, I should talk about the removal tools and stuff now. I'll wait till the right place. Alright, so that's crops. Now again, on the apple icon, the same thing for orchards here. Now, you also start on easy with 2 random orchard seeds. So in this case, we have peach and plum. And again, 120 squares, so 12 by 10, 11 by 11 is good for 1 worker. Okay, so all you need is a 12 by 10 or 11 by 11 and only put 1 farmer in there. Okay. The other things in here, third thing along is a pasture. Okay, so you can build various sizes. The only tip I have for pastures is build them as big as you can. But if you build multiple pastures, build them all the same size, same dimension. Now on an easy start, you get 1 random animal. In this case, we have cows here. Now they are just kind of milling around town right now. And at some point, they will wander off or die off if you don't build a pasture. So you're going to have to secure a pasture fairly quickly in the beginning. But don't count on them for food, because the way the pastures work is there'll be like a pasture size, like an animal limit. So it'll say a maximum 12 animals or something like that. If you have less than the maximum the pasture will hold, less animals, you won't get very much out of it. You might get a bit of leather, a bit of wool or something, but you won't get any meat. So the animals won't be slaughtered until the pasture's at maximum capacity, which won't happen for a while. So if you start on easy, build a pasture, get your animals in there, but don't count on them as a major food source in the beginning, okay? Alright, the next thing here is a fishing dock. Now, these can go anywhere, but if you'll notice there's a yellow circle in the fishing dock. What you want to do is maximize the water area in that circle. So, if you look at a placement here, like somewhere in a corner like this, where maximum water, that's a pretty good spot. This is a little bit of an outcrop here, that's not a bad spot. You can put them on lakes as well too. Don't play around with it. What you want is sort of a promontory. Something like that is actually perfect. So that's the best I can see there as far as coverage. Now, it doesn't give you any percentage feedback. You just have to eyeball it. But pay attention to the circle and don't put 2 fishing docks together. Make sure that the circles are discrete to each dock. Okay, so that's fishing docks. Next one is a hunting cabin. So this is a building that has a yellow circle as well. So here would be a decent spot. What you want for a hunting cabin is flat land. Okay, so no water and no hills, or as few as possible. Some maps is not that easy, but maximum amount of flat land. Now, you'll notice there's a few icons here. There's deer running around, for example, over here. Deer are, Those mean nothing. Those are just pretty in this game. So don't worry about where the deer are. What you want to do for a hunter is you want to maximize flat land, and ideally with trees as well too. Okay, and the last building here is a gathering hut. And it's the same thing as a hunting cabin, although the trees are more important to a gatherer. So you want maximum flat land, and this works best with trees. So the gatherer gathers wild food, and wild food grows under trees. So if you have like a bare area or, mountains or something like that, it won't work for the gatherer, right? So you gotta pick a place that's flat that has a lot of trees. Now, one advanced tactic is to put a gatherer, a forester, and a hunter together. It's called a forest node. And they work together in the same area. The forester will grow trees, and the gatherer will gather the food that grows under the trees, and the hunter will hunt the animals that, live in the trees, kind of thing. So the next icon along here is a resource production. So the first one is a woodcutter, the axe symbol here. You're going to want that fairly early because that's going to cut logs in firewood, and that's used to heat the homes. So you're going to want a woodcutter before winter. In fact, you're going to want it working and cutting firewood before winter. Next icon is a forester lodge. It has a yellow circle. So this needs flat land as well. And it'll do two things. It plants trees and harvests trees. So it is a source of logs, essentially. Okay, a herbalist here has a yellow circle as well. This harvests herbs from under the trees. Herbs have limited food value, and they add half a heart for health. So don't worry about this early game, but if your health is below 5 hearts, mid-game sort of, you can put these in your forest nodes, and people will go to the herbalist to get a little bit of a local homemade cure, if you will. Okay, next button along here is blacksmith. Now, these need to be built early as well, too. They make tools, and tools are the symbol up here in the town statistics. Tools make workers vastly more productive. So if you run out of tools, all your production will be slowed down. Food production will be slowed down. Firewood production will be slowed down. If you run out of tools at the wrong time, it can kill your town, right? If you're right on the edge of not quite having enough food, it's kind of close, or not enough firewood, and you run out of tools, then everything will slow down. So if food was a bit dicey, now suddenly your farmers are working way less efficiently, and you'll be in big trouble. So really the three things that cause death of towns are a lack of tools, lack of firewood, or lack of food. Okay, so blacksmith is pretty important to build and get in operation before your stock of tools runs out here. Next thing up is a tailor. Now this makes coats out of wool or leather. Now, what a coat does in Banished is it allows people to work outside longer before they run back to their house to warm up. Now, in the early game, this doesn't matter at all. You can wait a little bit before you build a tailor. Like, make sure you have your firewood, your food, and your tools secured before you build a tailor. Also, it'll take a while to accumulate enough leather from a hunter, say, to build an amount of coats that are worthwhile. So don't rush the tailor. At some point, put it in, though, because as your town expands, people will need to spend more time outside, and then it becomes a bit more important. All right, tavern here. This is a mid to late game building. What this does is takes food like apples and turns it into ale, which people will consume for happiness, yay. But also it's a good trade good. Now, I have really mixed feelings about turning food into anything other than food, because food is a really hard thing to secure in this game. So make sure if you put a tavern in and you start converting food into ale, whether for local consumption or trade, make sure your food supply is rock solid and steady before you do that. Okay, but not an early game building. Now this is a mine, the next one along. Mines can be a bit finicky to put in. They need to be put in on hills, and it needs to be a relatively straight, flat section here. Like you can't put it in, everywhere, right? So you're gonna need some of these, and you're gonna want to really check out good spots to put them in before you build the town around it, kind of thing. And the note, and this is also a quarry here, and this is built on flat land, and this is for rocks, okay? So the mine is getting iron, quarry, rocks. Now a note on these things, they're finite, so they have a certain amount that they'll use up, and then they stop working, and you can't remove them, so they're a bit of an eyesore. So you'll have to, if you're running your town for a long time, you'll have to continuously add new mines and new quarries. Or if you get more advanced, you can actually build trading docks and trade and buy iron and buy stone. Something to think about. But just understand they're finicky to place, and they will run out. And the quarry in the beginning, these are very slow to produce stone. So building a quarry and then putting 1 or 2 workers in is almost useless. So I would only build a quarry when you have sufficient town population that you can really fully staff it. And until then, I would be gathering resources off the ground, which again requires you to build bridges over the rivers and stuff like that. Alright, so that's a resource production tab. The last tab here is probably the one I should have covered first. This is removal and destruction. So, like I've got a pasture that's pending here. So this house with a line through it is remove structure. So you click that and that'll remove something. If your building's already built here, like for example this house, I can do remove structure. It shows a symbol to say this is in the process of deconstruction. If I did it by mistake or changed my mind, I could just go in here and hit the reclaim button. Okay. The next symbol here is remove resources. So this removes all resources. So basically logs, stone, and iron are what you have for resources. So you just run that through, and laborers will run over and collect up the material. Now one note, if you do removal, to collect the resources, make sure you have a stockpile close by. So this stockpile over here is reasonably close, that's not bad. But don't remove resources, say way over here, and have no stockpiles there. It'll happen very, very slowly. So if you want to go into an area, say up here, build a bridge, build a road, put a stockpile in, and then collect the resources. Okay, so that's remove resources all, basically. This is harvest trees, same thing, remove resources, but just trees, just stone, and just iron. Okay, this is remove roads, so if you built the road and you decide I don't really like that road, just come in here, remove road. And the last symbol is cancel removal. So if you say you designated a bunch of trees and a bunch of stone, and you realize that you have lots of logs but you want to prioritize the stone, you do something like cancel removal, and that cancels all the removal, and then you say, okay, I just want stone or something. Just an example of when you might want to cancel removal. Alright, so that's basically the icons down here. Now I want to talk a little bit about buildings and stuff here. So if I look at the house, this one will show you your occupants and your inventory. So if I let the game run a bit and turn the speed up, okay, see what happened is they all went into the barns, they got food and tools and coats, and they went and assigned themselves to a house, okay? So you can see a couple in here and a couple of kids, and inventory here, food and stuff like that. So, a couple of weird things here, at least the way the game's programmed, I think is a little bit weird. People eat 100 food per year each, and they'll put as much food as they can in the house. Well, not as much, but they'll put a sufficient stock of food in their houses. They won't go to each other's house to eat. So you could have a situation where you're low on food and one house has lots of food and another house has none. They won't eat from each other's houses. They only get food from the barn or the market and take it to their house. And same thing for firewood. Now, if they're traveling and they get cold, they will go into somebody's house to share the fire and warm up, which is a little bit different. So if you have a long, say, travel between areas, if your town gets quite large, as long as you have houses along the way, people will stop in and warm up and carry on, but they won't eat. They only eat at home. Okay? Or out of the barns. If they don't have a house, they'll actually go to a barn and get food and eat it there. But they won't eat in other people's houses. All right, now let's actually build a building here, and then I want to talk a little bit about stuff. So let's build a wood chopper here, and I'm just going to put him here. And I'm going to prioritize this just for fun. And I'm going to put, okay, you see up here it says builders, and this is in the professions area. What it showed when I first went up there was 12 laborers, nobody assigned a builder. And it shows here, it says 0 of 3. So what that means is, and this is the only thing we got building right now, is this needs 3 people to build it. So if you go up here and click builder and assign 3 people, now you can assign 1 or 2 as well. It'll just affect the speed, and that will be built. Okay, now first the laborers will remove anything that's, like if there was rocks or trees, in this case it's 0 of 0. Then the laborers bring the material, and then once the material is brought to the site, the builders will do the building here. And you can see here this number's incrementing. There's 45 build units, and now it's built. Okay, now we can leave those builders in, so we have 3 builders of 0 required. And if builders have nothing to do, they will just act like laborers, okay? Now this building is built, and it has a question mark. So question mark means nobody's working there. Now there's a couple of things at the top here. So this says 0 of 1, and there's no arrow there. So that means the maximum number of people that can work in here is 1, but there's currently 0 assigned. So if I hit the up arrow here, it assigns 1 person from the labor pool. Now the building says 1 of 1. Okay, we can assign more if we want, but it'll be meaningless. So I just want to assign the appropriate number. Now if this said, you could have if there was an arrow here for the amount of possible people, you could click that arrow up. So maybe it would say like 0 of 2 or something, and then you could assign 2 people. This particular building is only 1, okay? So the number on the left is the potential number of people that could work there, and this number here is essentially the same as this button up here in the professions tab, okay? Now this also has a fuel limit here of 200. So if you remember earlier, we talked about this button here, the resource limit. This is the same number. So if you change this fuel number here, it'll change it on your master resource list here, okay? So in the beginning, 200 firewood is fine. And as your town goes, you want to increase that. All right, maybe just to explain a little bit more on the job assignment arrows, let's go over here. And we were going to build our field in here. Actually, let's do it properly. So I'm going to do a 12 by 10. All right, now this crop field says 0 of 3, okay? Now, we know that 120 units, or 12 by 10 or 11 by 11, only needs 1 worker. So I'm going to click this arrow. There's up and down arrows here. Now this is for the amount of potential workers working here. So I'm going to click that down until it says 0 of 1, because the default is 3. You don't need 3, okay? So 0 of 1. Now I'm going to click this arrow over here, and I'm going to assign a person. Okay. And okay. Sorry, I derped that a bit. You have to assign a crop first. So let's put wheat in there. And now we're going to say 0, 1. We're going to assign a person. And now we have a farmer working there. Now remember again, your farmers have to be in by spring with a crop assigned. Okay, there's a few other things here. So this is how you assign a crop, is by clicking on that button. If their plants are already planting, don't do that. So wait till winter to reassign your crops if you want to do change your crops for any reason. There's a harvest button here. Ignore it unless you're in a disaster. The farmers will automatically sow in spring, maintain the field throughout the year, and then autumn the farmers will harvest. Now to aid the harvest, having a barn nearby is pretty essential. So this barn's actually fairly far away. So if I built more than one field over here, I would build another barn over here. So anyways, the farms are pretty much fire and forget, if you will. So once you've got a crop assigned, a farmer assigned, you can just ignore it. So if you build a larger crop field, you can build up to a 15 by 15 in vanilla, then assign 2 farmers. But up to 120 squares, only 1. This work button, as long as that lit up or is white, then it's working. If for some reason you want to stop production, you'd hit that. You get a stop sign, so nobody's actually working there. Although there is somebody assigned until you take them out. But no reason to hit that. Alright, so you come in, adjust the potential number of workers working there, assign a worker, after you pick a crop there. And let's see what else we want to talk about. Just a couple other things, I think. If you hit escape here, or go into your options, it's where your load, save, and all that kind of stuff is. A couple of things to look at here. In options, you can turn off the weather effect here under game tab. Show weather effects. Just unclick that if you don't like the interface being clouded up by snowstorms, or if you're streaming or something like that. And you can adjust, of course, all your sound and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is the achievement tab here. Now, there's no tutorial in Banished, but if you're playing vanilla and you want to learn the game, look at your achievements in here, and sort of once you get the basics down, work your way through some of these things. And if you can get most of these achievements, that'll mean you understand the game pretty well. And I would think at that point that you want to think about adding mods to your game and stuff like that. So Driz, I hope you watched that, or I hope it was helpful to you anyways. And let me know if that missed the mark, or if there's something else you'd like to see. I am DerpyMoose99.